Part of Saturday brings some mist around these North Sea coasts, and generally it will retreat back to the beaches, with most places inland seeing sunny skies. Some rain for a time for Shetland, but otherwise, although it will stay cloudy and cool in the north, most places are dry, and temperatures once again reaching 35 Celsius in places. Enough to spark a shower or two for the North Pennines, for the southern uplands, for example, where these occur, and they will be very isolated. They're likely to bring some very heavy rainfall, drifting north into central Scotland during Saturday evening. And then a more concerted breakdown in the weather during Sunday, Monday and Tuesday. Hot at first, but an increased risk of some very heavy thunderstorms.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to We Need to Talk About on GB News with me, Bev Turner, in for Alex Phillips. It is a beautiful Friday afternoon and we are diving you into the weekend with everything you need to know about what's hot in the news. Keeping me company today is the trade unionist and barrister, Lucy Massoud. Lucy's also a former firefighter, so we have a lot to talk about today. Here's what else is coming up on the show. A drought has officially been declared in several parts of England. 8 regions, including parts of the southwest, southern, central and the east of England, have been placed under the emergency conditions. It's as the temperatures in some parts of the country are set to reach 35 degrees this afternoon. We'll talk about what you can do to reduce the risk of wildfires and beat the heat. And with the average price of energy bills set to hit over £4,000 per household next year, the cost of living crisis is top of the agenda for Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss in their bids to become the next Prime Minister. The pair have put forward contrasting visions for how to tackle rising prices, with Liz Truss affirming that tax cuts are the way to ease the burden on households. Rishi Sunak, on the other hand, has said he would put a £5 billion package in place to help those most vulnerable to rising prices. We're going to be discussing the candidates' plans and how well they've been received by Tory voters. The actress Anne Heche, who featured in Donnie Brasco, Cedar Rapids and the 1998 remake of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, is not expected to survive after a car crash this week, her family has said. The star of screen is currently in a coma. Los Angeles police are currently investigating her for driving under the influence after LA police found drugs in her system following the crash. I'm going to speak to entertainment expert Stephanie Heche about that a little later this hour. That's what we're talking about, all coming up. But what do you want to tell me? gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at GBNews. Do not go anywhere. First of all, it's time for the GB News headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 2:02. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB Newsroom. A drought has been declared in large parts of southern, central, east and southwest England. It means more water companies can begin announcing stricter measures to conserve supplies. Months of dry weather sees millions of people facing hosepipe bans, with Yorkshire Water becoming the latest firm to announce one from the 26th. A 4-day amber warning for extreme heat from the Met Office is currently in place for parts of England and Wales. The Environment Secretary George Eustice says forcing people not to use hosepipe pipes wasn't a big request.
We're in a very strong position now, stronger position than we've ever been to deal with these sorts of drought conditions. But as I said, it's still the hottest, driest July since 1935, the driest summer in 50 years. To have in some parts of the country a hosepipe ban is a relatively small sacrifice for people to make in order to ensure that we are preserving our water resources in case there's a dry winter and in case there's a problem next summer.
Well, speaking to us earlier, meteorologist John Hammond said we must be careful about our water usage.
I think it's just a wise move for us to sort of restrict our water usage to some extent now, because big problems could lie ahead, as I say, if we carry on with this dry theme. And although it's going to be wetter next week, and yes, you'll think it's kind of back to normal because the temperatures will fall by 10 or 15 degrees. That is really papering over the cracks of what is a much bigger issue beneath the ground, where groundwater levels will continue to fall unless we have sustained wet weather.
Boris Johnson's admitted the current help for people struggling with the spiralling cost of living and rising energy prices isn't enough. It comes as a new price cap prediction claims the average family's annual energy bill could reach £5,300 by April next year. Speaking on a visit to North Wales, the outgoing Prime Minister also insisted there'll be extra help for the most hard-hit households. That's regardless of who succeeds him.
Cash is not only coming through now and has started to come through, but will continue to come through over the weeks and months ahead.
But people saying it's not enough. It's not enough.
And in addition, what we are doing is making sure that we have the fiscal firepower, we have the cash to help people more at those two key points, in October and in January.
The UK economy shrank by 0.1% between April and June, according to official figures. The Office for National Statistics says the phasing out of COVID-19 spending is partly to blame. The big fall of economic growth in June, it says, was partly caused by the extra bank holiday to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. Well, Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi says he's looking at additional ways to help vulnerable households.
My task was to make sure we get the 37 billion out into people's pockets. We're midway through that, so in the next couple of months people will see their bills reduced by £400. The most vulnerable, 8 million, will get £324. So my message to the viewers is we're looking at all the options of what additional help we need to bring in later on in the winter months, in December and January. Work those up so they're ready to go from the 5th of September when the Prime Minister walks into number 10.
Tributes are being held in the city of Plymouth today, marking 1 year since 5 people were killed by a gunman in Kiam. A civic ceremony has taken place at the Minster Church of St Andrew, and a community vigil will take place later. Jake Davison killed his mother following a row and then shot 4 others. After the attack, he turned the weapon on himself. The former US president says claims the FBI was searching for classified documents relating to nuclear weapons were a hoax. Earlier, the Washington Post reported agents raided Donald Trump's Florida home on Monday looking for nuclear documents. It comes just hours after the US Department of Justice had asked a federal judge in Florida to unseal the search warrant. Over 21,000 people have been brought to safety to the UK from Afghanistan, the government reports. They include British nationals and their families, Afghans who worked for the UK, and those identified as high risk. It's almost a year since the Taliban took over. And the shortlist of potential UK host cities for Eurovision 2023 is out. 7 are on it: Birmingham, Glasgow, Leeds, Liverpool, Manchester, Newcastle and Sheffield. The UK was chosen to host the contest after organisers decided it couldn't be staged by this year's winners, Ukraine. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Bev with We Need to Talk About.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us here on GB News. Aren't you clever? Tell your mates about us if you like what we do. Now, a drought has been declared today across parts of the UK by the Environment Agency. It means that even tighter water restrictions will come into force for some, in addition to hosepipe bans. It comes as an extreme heat warning came into effect yesterday for much of England and Wales and will last until Sunday. Temperatures will rise again today, reaching highs of at least 33 degrees. The heat wave is certainly having an impact on the usual green fields across Britain. A satellite image we're just showing here, taken on Wednesday by Copernicus, the EU's Earth observation programme, shows huge parts of the country have turned from green to brown due to the dry conditions. Southern England received just 17% of its average rainfall in July, leaving water levels in many lakes and reservoirs at record lows. GB News reporter Paul Hawkins has been at Wimble Lake in Somerset and has the latest.
Here at Wimble Lake in Somerset in the southwest, you can see with your own eyes just how much this drought, this lack of rainfall over the past few months, certainly over July, the driest July in England since 1935, the effect it has had on the level of water, which has receded significantly, leaving behind very dry, very parched, very arid landscape. This lake is used for recreational activities, but frankly that's not the top concern at the moment. The top concern is how South West Water, indeed the water companies across England, are going to supply water to the general public and also to the many businesses and farmers, agriculture that rely on the water, because the ground here is so dry, so parched and arid. It's not just a problem for farmers who are trying to plant crops, who are trying to get crops out of the ground. The fact is, obviously that's not good for the seedlings and for the plants themselves, but the ground is so hard that it is difficult for the farmers to get their equipment into the soil, and it's frankly it's ruining the machinery, it's ruining parts of the machinery, making it very difficult to get their equipment into the ground to pull the plants out, which themselves are suffering because of a lack of rain. Now, how to change this situation? Well, the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology says we're going to need significant amounts of rainfall. In fact, exceptional rainfall for 1 month up to 3 months, really, if the situation is going to correct itself, if the levels of underground water and in the rivers and in the reservoirs are going to restore themselves. There are some scattered thunderstorms forecast for next week, but short, sharp, scattered, intense bursts of rain are no good. Falling on the hard ground, they just run off straight into the rivers and straight out to sea. They don't hang around in the soil long enough to replenish the reservoirs and the underground stores of water. So what we need is light rain over a long period, over large parts of England for at least a couple of months. That's what the experts are saying, if this situation is going to correct itself. And then, of course, there's the problem with leaks as well within the water system. 25% of the problem comes from leaks in pipes, underground pipes, which actually is a better situation than it was many years ago. But still, a lot of experts are saying that the water companies need to get better at plugging leaks, and we as consumers need to become more efficient with our water use if we're going to conserve water in the future, and certainly if we're going to have to go through this again next summer if this autumn and this winter are as dry as the last one.
Okay, well done. Thank you, Paul Hawkins. You know what else we need? We need some more reservoirs, because a lot of the water companies sold them off to property developers and built houses on them, and we haven't had a new one for 30 years. That's also what we need. Right, now, with temperatures soaring across the country, thousands of people are heading to rivers and lakes in the hopes of cooling off. Wild swimming, as it's become known. You know what it used to be called? It used to be called swimming until the Sunday supplements got hold of it and made it a lifestyle choice. It's become very popular since the end of the pandemic, even before that, actually, but of course it isn't without its risks. Ed Crawford, our East of England reporter, has been at a lake in Cambridgeshire. Lucky him to find out more.
This summer, Brits are looking to cool off, and wild swimming locations are busier than ever. Tragically, since the 2022 heatwave began in July, 13 people have drowned in the UK's open waters. Now, local authorities around the country are warning of the hidden dangers involved with open water swimming. On the outskirts of Huntington in Cambridgeshire is Lake Ashmore. Lake Ashmore has paddleboarding, wakeboarding and wild swimming sessions regularly, and there's always lifeguards on duty. Professional swim coaches like Andy know how easy it is to find yourself in deep water.
Some of the dangers involved in wild swimming obviously is the sudden drop-off in temperature in the water, the depth of the water, changes in current in the water as well. Even though this is a lake and you wouldn't expect it to have a current, sometimes it's fed by a stream and it can push you out into the middle of the lake. If there's a breeze blowing, that will also push you out away from where you got in the water, and so they're the things you need to really look at while you're swimming in open water.
The lake has regulars who take to the water all year round. Even as temperatures dip, they regularly take the plunge. Seasoned swimmers like Debbie and Steffi know the dangers involved in wild swimming.
Always go with somebody else, and if you do go on your own, because some people like to go on their own, tell people where you're going. Make sure you start gently and increase your distance, and when you start off, stay near the shore so you can get
Never jump in unless you can see the bottom. Make sure you can see where you're going. Get one of these so you can help yourself, you can float. Make yourself visible with hats or things that, you know, if you're on a river, if there's boats, they can see you. Yeah, and just be sensible. Take it easy. It's not a race.
So if you're looking to cool off this summer, what are the best ways to stay safe in the water?
The main thing is to come to an organised venue that's putting on open swim like we've got here. Other than that is to make sure that you're always swimming with other people. Make sure you know the area that you're swimming in, so look for any hidden dangers. Look if you can see if there's any sudden drop-off in the depth of the water. Make sure there's no hidden debris in the water. And just generally, the water will be a lot colder than what it is in the air temperature, so just make sure that you get used to that cold water when you get in, because it will be a lot colder than the air temperature normally.
Oh, it's cold out here. It's really cold out.
While some may find it pleasant to cool down during the higher temperatures, authorities hope people will think twice before getting into unknown waters. Ed Crawford, GB News.
Oh, I'm very jealous. And also, buy one of those little inflatable floats. You've seen them with the swimmers with there. I've got one of those. You can get them cheap online, and it does mean if you do get tired, if you're out swimming, you can have a little rest on it. Right, joining me now in the studio is Lucy Massoud, a trade unionist, a barrister and former firefighter. Hello, Lucy. We were just having a little chat. We were watching that piece from Paul Hawkins about the drought. Let's talk a little bit about fires in this hot weather, because it's often depicted on the media as though this is the climate which is causing these fires and fields are spontaneously bursting into flames. That's not what's going on here, is it?
No, absolutely not. We know what's causing these fires, and it's humans. The climate does contribute because, of course, the hotter it is, the more likely people are to go and sit on the beach and have a barbecue or have a barbecue at home or spend more time outside. But, yeah, it absolutely is people not really taking care of their surroundings that will lead to fires. And, I mean, it's really quite serious because we know that there's been massive cuts to the fire service across the country. I mean, in London alone, we've seen 10 fire stations closed in the last few years, 1,000 job losses of firefighters and 29 fire engines taken away from frontline service. So when we are having these grass fires, and you know, some of them are really quite significant, the fire service just don't have the people on the ground to fight these fires. It's really quite concerning.
And what do you do if it's in the middle of an urban park? It's not always easy to get not called fire engines.
They are called fire engines.
Fire engines.
That's exactly what they're called.
What's the other word for them?
Appliances.
A fire appliance. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. An appliance is a dishwasher. But a fire appliance, you can't always get them into the middle of a park, can you?
Well, absolutely. If you're in the middle of the countryside, you won't be able to get that fire engine there and then connect that fire engine to the water supply. So what I did on a few occasions, normally at Hampstead, if there was a grass fire, you'd go along with a piece of equipment that's called a beater, which is essentially a bit of leather attached to a bit of wood, and you just batter the flame.
That's it.
That's
what you can do.
Yes. You also have something else called a water backpack, which is a great fun bit of equipment. It's a backpack full of water. You look like a Ghostbuster.
Yeah.
And you go and you pump away and again try and put the fire out. It's all well and good if it's a small contained fire, but anything like the fires we saw last week, you're not going to stand a chance. And grass fires and wildfires are really the most unpredictable fires you can have. And if something is going to take a firefighter's life, it's going to be one of those types of fires.
So we've just seen that little piece there is, again, about outdoor swimming, wild swimming, as we now call it. As I say, it used to be called swimming in my day. And that is often the cause of deaths at this time of year. It's not in these hot temperatures that people are dying from dehydration or anything like that. It's the fact that they get into difficulty when they're swimming. I think it was about 15 people lost their lives in that last heat wave. Again, it's human behaviour. What kind of things do people do, Lucy, that get them into trouble in the water?
I mean, I'm not a lifeguard, but just, you know, from my own observations, you will get people throwing themselves off Westminster Bridge into the Thames or throwing themselves off rocks. I spend quite a lot of time in Guernsey, because where my partner's from, and there's beautiful beaches there. It's like being in the Caribbean, but you will see some quite, you know, problematic behaviour of people just lobbing themselves off cliffs and then getting into trouble. And as your reporter said, if you're going to go swimming in this beautiful weather, and you can't blame anyone not going, and you can't tell people to stay at home and not go swimming. It's a beautiful country. We have some beautiful rivers and beaches. We really need to use them. But it's really, if you are going to go swimming, go with a friend, make sure people know where you are, and just be sensible. Try not to get too drunk.
And you know what? And don't get too drunk. That's such a good tip. But do you know what really makes me cross, Lucy? In the last couple of years, we've got 60 public swimming pools that have closed during the pandemic that will probably never open again. And some of these organised outdoor swimming facilities, like the one we've just seen there on the video, there's one down in Oxfordshire, not far from where my parents live, in Caversham. It's fantastic. They've been trying to get planning permission over and over again to expand their facility so that they can provide these activities which help us and make us healthy. And the government, it just feels, and the local authorities aren't supporting these sorts of facilities that we need.
Well, absolutely. We know when the facilities are there, people use them. So I live in Tooting, in southwest London, and we have a gorgeous Lido there, and it's used all year round.
It's very old. It's Victorian Lido, isn't it?
And it's packed. And if you want to go in the summer, I haven't been this summer, actually, but last summer you had to book online and get a ticket. It was a whole faff. But we know people use it, and people even use it in the winter. Have more facilities like that. People will use them. As you say, people, it will help people's health, it will impact on our obesity crisis, etc. But if it's not there, people can't use it, and then people do silly things by jumping off bridges into the Thames because they think that's fun.
Talking of obesity, there was a story that was in the press this week. I've been hosting on GBNews every day this week, and there was a story about 3 or 4 days ago that firefighters are being called out to record numbers of individuals who are so big that they need you to winch them out of their own homes. It's one of the most shocking stories I've seen in a long time. We came at it during the week from a kind of fitness and health and obesity point of view, but I'm so glad as a former firefighter you're here. Just talk me through that scenario with you guys as emergency services. Who called you and what do you have to do?
I mean, it's one of those things, it's part of our job. As much as we would like to sort of spend our time focusing on fires and, you know, real emergencies, it is part of our job. And unfortunately, we live in a country now where people are getting fatter and fatter and not able to leave their homes in cases of emergency. So in a situation like that, it would be the firefighters turning up. Normally, it would just be a call to our 999 service. We would turn up, and it normally involves us removing parts of their house, taking out their windows, taking out their doors because they can't get out, and then sometimes having to winch them out if they're on the top floor. It's awful for the individual because, of course,
awful.
You know, there's no dignity in it. It's not great for us. We've got to look after our backs, you know. shoveling fat people back and forward. But of course, again, I go back to my previous point, we have a fire service that's on its knees at the moment. It's stretched to the capacity.
Yeah.
And we're having to spend time on things like that and not time on things like actual emergencies.
Just to give you some concepts of the numbers that we're talking about here, the call-outs for obesity lifting, what do you call it? What's the official name for it? I'm putting you on the spot.
I can tell you what firefighters call it, but probably not for daytime TV.
Sorry, that's a totally inappropriate laughter, but it is a ridiculous situation. So 2020 to 21, the numbers of people that were too big to leave their own house without the help of a fire service rose by 24% from 1,300 before the pandemic. Increased by 24% from 1,300 before the pandemic in 20... OK, so it's now 1,326 people. In 2012, there were 429 of these rescues. Bariatric rescues, that's what we call them.
That's what we call them.
And at least 7 fire appliances were called out to attend on 11 occasions. This is in 2020 to 21. At least 4 on 187 call-outs, requiring the assistance of between 30 and 39 firefighters. I mean, is that a good use of your time?
It's absolutely not a good use of our time, but also I think it's an illustration of where our society is at the moment in regards to people's health, and that we're in a situation where, the NHS aren't able to deal with that situation because they're under-resourced. They have to get the fire service to deal with the situation, similar to how the fire service are now dealing with situations where the ambulance service should be, but they're not able to. So it is a complete mess. Something needs to be done.
Yeah.
What? I don't know.
I don't know. And in fact, the police, I've done a few stories this week about the police, and they're dealing with so many social issues as well that aren't strictly, catching criminals. Right, let me know what you think. GBViews at gbnews.uk or tweet at GBNews. Me and Lucy will be here until 3 o'clock. You are watching and listening to GB News on TV and DAB radio. Coming up, the family of Hollywood actress Anne Heche have said that she is not expected to survive the car crash that she was in last week. We'll bring you the latest on this story after the weather.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Hot and sunny once again for the vast majority, with 35 Celsius possible in places today and tomorrow. A couple of exceptions, it will stay much cooler for the far north of Scotland with cloud, some outbreaks of rain here, although not a great deal, and some mistiness around northeastern coasts, so eastern Scotland and northeast England will see some mist and low cloud, not everywhere, but certainly a signal for some of that to linger around these coasts, keeping things much cooler here as well. But elsewhere it's sunny and it is very hot. Temperatures widely reaching 30 to 33 Celsius, and in the south 34 or 35 Celsius are possible. The hot spot, I think, somewhere around the Midlands into the West Country and London. Into the evening, and there will be some outbreaks of rain close to the Northern Isles as well as the Outer Hebrides, but this will generally be light and patchy, and around these North Sea coasts once again mist, low cloud, fog creeps in, but elsewhere clear spells and a very warm night to come, with temperatures in places staying up in the mid to high teens. The start of Saturday brings some mist around these North Sea coasts, and generally it will retreat back to the beaches, with most places inland seeing sunny skies. Some rain for a time for Shetland, but otherwise, although it will stay cloudy and cool in the north, most places are dry, and temperatures once again reaching 35 Celsius in places. Enough to spark a shower or two for the North Pennines, for the southern uplands, for example, where these occur, and they will be very isolated. They're likely to bring some very heavy rainfall, drifting north into central Scotland during Saturday evening. And then a more concerted breakdown in the weather during Sunday, Monday and Tuesday. Hot at first, but an increased risk of some very heavy thunderstorms.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So Howie in for Real Britain, Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. Good afternoon. This is We Need to Talk About. On GB News, I am Bev Turner, sitting here for Alex Phillips. Now, sad story. Hollywood movie star Anne Heche, and mother of two, crashed her car into a two-storey home in Los Angeles last week. Her family have said that she is not expected to survive the crash. She remains in a coma and has a severe anoxic brain injury. The Los Angeles Police Department have said the crash is being treated as a felony. Initial blood tests show that there were drugs in her system. Joining me now is Stephanie Teche, who is our showbiz reporter. Stephanie, good afternoon. Lovely to see you.
See you.
Nice to see you. So just tell us a bit about Anne Heche, because she's one of those people who isn't necessarily a household name, but when you see her face, you go, oh, I know who she is. I remember seeing her in such a movie. What's her background?
I totally agree with that. She has got one of those recognisable faces, but it's like, what films has she been in? And I honestly do believe she's been one of Hollywood's underrated actresses, but she's been very consistent in her career. She's had some big films under her credits. You know, she starred in the 1998 remake of Psycho. She was also in Ally McBeal. She was in Donnie Brasco. She's been in so many films, like films that we all know and love, and she's always played good parts. And one of the best films that I personally loved her in was she was in 6 Days, 7 Nights opposite Harrison Ford, and that was one of the big films that made her name. But also she was in a very high-profile relationship with Ellen DeGeneres for 3 years. So they were dating from 1997 to 2000, and that was quite at the beginning of Ellen's career when she had just came out. And Anne was one of the first people, one of her first girlfriends that she went public with. So that relationship was very high profile, and there was a lot of interest into both of their lives since then. Ellen has come out and said that she hasn't really made a comment on Anne's situation, but she said she's aware of what's happened, but they haven't been in touch for many years. With Anne, over the past few years, she hasn't had many big roles, and it's quite sad. There's this last haunting picture of her behind the car wheel with a bottle of vodka, where people are thinking obviously it must have been hard times for her, but with this situation we never know, and more than anything, she's a mother of 2 children that she will leave behind.
That is very sad. I didn't realise until we were talking about it, I didn't realise that she was a mum, and that is awful. Like you say, there's a paparazzi picture where she's sat in the car, the door is open, there's a bottle of vodka in the sort of centre console of the 2 seats. Although initial tests are saying that she didn't have any alcohol in her system when she crashed. She wasn't drink driving. But, Stephanie, the events leading up to her, the family are now saying will have been the fatal crash, are pretty chaotic. And there are pictures of those as well, aren't they? She didn't just come off the road. She nearly ran over some pedestrians.
Definitely, and she had actually 2 accidents as well. And if you see some of the videos and photos that have been circling online, it would have been a miracle if she survives. But the only good thing that will come out of this situation that the family have said is that she's still on life support, because they're hoping that her organs will be viable for donation. So there has to be some good that comes out of this situation. But, Bev, it always happens in Hollywood. Like, these celebrities, we see them on the red carpet and we think their lives are all glamorous. But behind, off the screens, they live completely different lives. When the phones stop ringing and you're not getting the roles and you still have to maintain this high profile lifestyle, it's quite a lot. And a lot of stars I know and have heard of, they're battling addictions in their own life. And I'm sure, Anne wouldn't have expected it to end this way, but it just goes to show you can never glamorize this Hollywood lifestyle, because sometimes it does end tragically.
Yeah, it does. All right, thank you, Stephanie. Showbiz reporter Stephanie Heche there, talking about the very sad news from Anne Heche's family, that they do not expect her to have survived the crash. She's currently in a hospital with a significant brain injury. Now, keep your views coming to me here on GB News, won't you? This is what we've got coming up for the rest of the show. Liz Truss has defended the profits of energy companies, saying they should not be considered dirty and evil. This comes as the energy price cap could top £5,000 next year. We've got a bit more on that after the break. But first of all, a check on the weather.
Haven't got the weather, but I do have the news. It's at 2:33. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. A drought has been declared in parts of southern, central, east and southwest England. It means yet more water companies may begin announcing stricter measures to conserve supplies. It follows months of dry weather and comes as Yorkshire Water becomes the latest to impose a hosepipe ban. The UK economy shrank by 0.1% between April and June, according to official figures. That compares to the first 3 months of the year when GDP grew. The Office for National Statistics says the phasing out of COVID-19 spending is partly to blame, as well as the extra bank holiday to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. Boris Johnson's admitted the current help for people struggling with the spiralling cost of living isn't enough. Speaking on a visit to North Wales, the outgoing Prime Minister also insisted there'll be extra help for the most hard-hit households. That's regardless of who succeeds him. Meanwhile, from Edinburgh, Sir Keir Starmer's made claims that it's Labour that's been leading on the cost of living crisis.
Had the government acted more quickly on the windfall tax, then for many more months families would have been protected under a better scheme by Labour. If the government had acted on Labour's idea for VAT to be reduced, to be eliminated on energy bills, many people would be better off. For the 4 million who are using prepayment meters, we're saying clearly we would abolish them. It would help 4 million people who very often are those struggling most throughout this crisis.
The former US president says claims the FBI was searching for classified documents relating to nuclear weapons were a hoax. It comes just hours after the US Department of Justice had asked a federal judge in Florida to unseal a search warrant. And the short list of potential UK host cities for Eurovision 2023 has been released. 7 cities are on it: Birmingham, Glasgow, Leeds, Liverpool, Manchester, Newcastle and Sheffield. The UK was chosen to host the contest after organisers decided it couldn't be staged by this year's winners, Ukraine. TV online and DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News. It's back to Bev with We Need to Talk About in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You are with Bev Turner on GB News. Thank you for joining us. Now, Tory leadership frontrunner Liz Truss was last night accused by Rishi Sunak of putting vulnerable people at risk of real destitution, says he, after she indicated that she'll put tax cuts and fracking above support payments for families facing unaffordable fuel bills. It's as today the Prime Minister Boris Johnson admitted that the cost of living support that the government is providing is not enough. At a hustings event last night in Cheltenham, the pair clashed on how to deal with the cost of living crisis as bills skyrocket for millions of families across the country. So joining me now on the show is Angela Knight, who's the former CEO of Energy UK. Hello, Angela. It's really good to see you. I've heard you talking about this issue publicly, and I think you make the most sense out of a lot of people talking a lot of nonsense on this topic. So I'm delighted that we've got you here. Let's just start with some real basics, Angela. How have we got into this situation in the first place? Explain to us why our energy bills are going through the roof.
Well, there's a few reasons. I wish there was one simple reason, but there never is. And the first is that when we locked down, of course, energy consumption was very low. So a lot of things which would normally have happened, like maintenance and so on, didn't happen. New exploration of wells didn't happen. And then, of course, we unlocked and suddenly here comes the economies right around the world back up and running. And so there's an energy shortage. Well, that was the first thing. On the back of that, Putin invades Ukraine. Europe in particular says, well, we're now going to put sanctions on you. And the result of that is he has not quite, but he switched off most of the gas, which was being supplied directly to Europe, with arguably Italy, Germany and Spain the worst hit. On the back of that, then, comes along inflation, and we've seen that hit us big time. So if you put it all together, you've got this mix that we have at the moment, which says supply is not enough. Demand is high, the price is up, and we're seeing this just carry on moving up more and more. Some of the things, I suppose, could have been avoided. We could have had a greater degree of investment in the UK earlier. We could have built greater storage. But at the same time, we're actually in a better position than many other European countries. And so what we've got to do now, as a government, as a country, is first of all, make sure that those people who are in the poorest end of society are helped through this winter, which does mean that what they've already received or are receiving will need to increase. You know, we're a modern democracy. We can't let people who are on low incomes simply not be able to pay their fuel bills. We can't do that. It's the old and the poor, and we just have to deal with that. So that's, I think, is step one. I think step two is that we must decide exactly how we reform our energy market, because there's some things that we've got in there which were all designed for trying to encourage wind, which was good. I'm not disagreeing with that. But right now, we've actually, that very design for wind is resulting in a much higher electricity price pulled up by the gas price. Now, it's a complicated algorithm, and it's one of these things that you more or less need to sit in a darkened room with a cold towel around your head for. But the bottom line is, if we split out the gas-fired generation cost from everything else, from the low-carbon cost, then that would bring down the wholesale market price of electricity here in the UK, which is in our control, and it would bring that down for domestic, but also for industry. So that's something that needs to be done, and it should be done quickly. There's some subsidies that sit on our bills, subsidies for insulation, subsidies for what's called the green levies. They're paid for on our bills. Now, there's contractual arrangements in place. You can't break the contractual arrangements, but you can shift who pays them. And I would say take them off the bill at the moment in time and put that onto general taxation. Let's say we'll do that for a year or 18 months. There's a few things which would together bring down our bills on a more longer term basis for everybody, whilst, as I say, additional particular assistance for the poorer parts of society.
OK, Angela, I told everybody you were the most sensible person on this issue, and I was not wrong. I could talk to you all afternoon. Rather than you being the former CEO of Energy UK, I wish you were the current CEO of Energy UK. Actually, I wish you were in the running to be Prime Minister, but maybe that's for the next few years for you. But thank you very much, Angela. I do have to move on. Angela Knight there, former CEO of Energy UK. So let me go now to the head of political polling at Opinium Research, Chris Curtis. Chris, I don't know whether you just heard what Angela Knight was saying there. She was talking really about more means-tested benefits to help the most vulnerable with these extortionate energy bills. Because that, she said, we cannot live in a developed democracy and have the poorest and the elderly not being able to heat their homes. With that in mind, which of our potential prime ministers is going to do the sensible measures that Angela Knight was just suggesting?
Hello, thank you for having me. I think that it's clear that one of the big debates that's been happening in this leadership contest between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss is over this exact question. Rishi Sunak has broadly been saying, you know, the priority for extra government spending or extra government money at the moment needs to basically be helping people with their energy bills, particularly those who are struggling the most. Roughly along the lines of what we were just hearing there. Liz Truss's main argument has been around, actually, what we need to be doing right now is cutting taxes. And let's be honest, those tax cuts are not going to help low incomes. They're not going to help pensioners who are most in need of support on energy bills right now. They're disproportionately going to help those who need it the least. So there is this argument in the Conservative leadership election at the moment. And I think, you know, Rishi Sunak is firmly placing himself a little bit more along the lines of what we've just been hearing there.
Yeah, I hate to say it because I'm not a massive fan of either of them, to be honest. But out of the two of them, I'd probably be more likely to feel like I'd sleep easy at night if Liz Truss was in there. But from what Angela's just said, it sounds like Rishi Sunak is more on the money in terms of how to handle this particular problem. Right, what are you seeing? You're ahead of polling at Opinium Research, Chris. Who is looking most likely to get the keys to number 10 on the 5th of September?
Well, our poll will be out tomorrow, so I don't too much want to preempt that. But I will say that based on the public opinion polling...
Come on,
I can't do that. I can't do that, if only because I haven't looked at the numbers yet, because I didn't want to come on having seen the numbers. But what we have seen from the public polling that's been done so far is quite a substantial lead for Liz Truss, you know, somewhere in the region of 30 points, which is the kind of lead that you don't normally lose. So I think at this point, and I'll be much more comfortable once I've had a look at my numbers saying this, but at this point, I think we can be fairly confident that Liz Truss is going to be Prime Minister in September.
Because it's about 160,000 Conservative Party members who get to vote. Some of them will have already sent back their vote, won't they? I mean, it might be that CCHQ know right now who's going to be there. It's dragging out a bit, isn't it, Chris? I think this should just put us all out of our misery and make a decision.
Yeah, this is broadly the problem with Conservative leadership elections, particularly given they happen by post, is you have this period of time now where everybody can be, you know, feel fairly confident who's won, but you have 4 weeks of returning and counting ballot papers, which is the process that's going on now. And my God, there hasn't been a worse time to have a country where, you know, there isn't a Prime Minister, you know, making these big decisions. We've heard Boris Johnson saying, you know, there is urgent action that's needed in response to the cost of living crisis, but wait a few weeks for my replacement to come in and do it. And of course, you know, while we're waiting, things are getting worse and worse. So I think, you know, that there is a risk to the Conservative Party in particular right now about the country looking rudderless at such a crucial moment.
All right, Chris, thank you. Come back when you know your actual numbers, won't you? Chris Curtis there,
I will do.
Head of Polling at Opinium Research. Lucy Massoud is still with me now. So you're a Labour voter, Lucy, and you work with the trade unionists as well. Which of these would you like to see in number 10? Who's going to be an easy win for Labour?
God, it's like a choice between a punch in the face and a punch in the throat. I mean, not just a Labour voter. I'm a Labour member, have been since I was 16. It's a difficult one. I think Sunak did a decent enough job during lockdown with his furlough scheme. He worked very closely with the trade unions.
Well, he just gave it all away, Lucy. That's why we're in this position that we're in now.
Which, as a lefty trade unionist, we like.
I bet you love that. A bit of luxury communism.
A bit more of that. Obviously, with Liz Truss, I think what she's doing now strategically is right. She's appealing to the Tory party membership. Sunak seems to be more appealing to the wider audience, but those are the people who aren't going to elect him. I'm not going to elect him. It's going to be down to those Tory members who are going to clearly elect Liz Truss. What I do like, although I can't stand either of their politics, what I do like is that I live in a country where our next Prime Minister is either going to be a female or a brown person.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that that's not an issue. And it's not going to prevent them. It's not going to prevent Liz Truss from being Prime Minister because she's female or Rishi Sunak because he's brown. Yeah. And we're going to have a Conservative Party who are going to have either their third leader being female or their first leader being a brown person like me. Compare that to the Labour Party, who can't even answer the question, does a woman have a penis? As a Labour member, I'm a bit embarrassed right now. Yeah. And they need to pull the finger out.
It's a really good point because actually, even when we were narrowing it down from that initial, I think it was about 13 candidates to be PM, and then they obviously got knocked off one by one. And we had in there Kemi Badenoch and we had Suella Braverman. And not once did anybody really say, wow, look at the diversity of this lineup. We were talking about their character. That's a victory for diversity, isn't it?
Absolutely. We've come so far in this country. And like I say, I'm a very proud English woman. I say English rather than British because I am English and I live in England. But that's called putting diversity into action rather than just ticking boxes. I would rather see a Prime Minister who's got there on their merits because they're female or because they're brown rather than someone who's there because they put pronouns in their bio. It means nothing.
Absolutely. Well said, Lucy. I asked you to send in your thoughts and we were talking about the drought and Lee got in touch to say, I agree, Bev, we need more reservoirs. It's ridiculous how long it is since they built one. Also, the water companies are to blame for not keeping the pipes in good condition. There was a flood in London the other day due to a burst pipe. So much water is lost, leaking out of pipes. We're going to bring you now a little bit from Sir Keir Starmer. Do you remember him, Lucy? We don't see him very much, do we? It'll be nice to see what he's been up to. Labour leader Keir Starmer has been reacting to the Environment Agency's latest declaration. He was asked if water companies are doing enough to fix the leaks whilst parts of the UK are subject to hosepipe bans. Here's what he said.
Had the government acted more quickly on the windfall tax, then for many more months families would have been protected under a better scheme by Labour. If the government had acted on Labour's idea for VAT to be reduced, to be eliminated on energy bills, many people would be better off. For the 4 million who are using prepayment meters, we're saying clearly we would abolish them, would help 4 million people who very often are those struggling most throughout this crisis.
It's unusual to see him, isn't it? Don't you get frustrated, though, as a Labour member, that he doesn't land more blows at a time when they are literally all on the ropes?
I'm beyond frustrated with him. He's Captain Hindsight, Mr. I mean, you name it. He shouldn't be the party leader. We need, whether you're Labour or Conservative, we need an effective opposition, and we don't have it with him. And I don't really see anyone who can take his place, unfortunately. But Labour's in a massive state at the moment. They're hemorrhaging voters, they're hemorrhaging female voters, and they need to do something about it if they want to be a credible opposition.
I couldn't agree more. Why aren't there better people in politics, Lucy? Why aren't you in politics?
Oh, they don't pay enough.
You know what, ladies and gentlemen? Everybody that sits in this chair, when we're off air, I say to them, why are you not in politics? Because they're all really good commentators. And do you know what? They all say it doesn't pay enough. Fascinating. Right, the shortlist of cities that could host the Eurovision Song Contest 2023 has been revealed. Manchester, Birmingham, Glasgow, Leeds, Sheffield, Newcastle and Liverpool have all made the shortlist out of a total of 20 cities that expressed their interest. The decision for the UK to hold the contest this year was made after organisers decided that it couldn't be held in Ukraine for obvious reasons because of the ongoing war with Russia. So let's talk to showbiz reporter Ellie Phillips now. Hello, Ellie. Nice to see you. Now, why isn't London on the shortlist, first of all? Not that I think it should be.
Yeah, I think it's the right decision that London isn't on the shortlist, to be honest. There are so many major events that take place here. It would have been the obvious choice and then kind of the boring one. And I think it's only right that Eurovision showcases elsewhere in the country. And like you said, it's been narrowed down to 7 potential cities, all of which are either, well, they're from the Midlands up, essentially. And then we've got one in Scotland, we've got Glasgow as well. Glasgow are actually front runners at the moment in terms of like the bookies' odds on who will win. But I have a sneaky suspicion Newcastle could nab it purely because of logistics, in that they're big stadiums, they're big arenas up there. There's only one production that's lined up to take place over the month that would be needed for it to be cleared out for the Eurovision to take place, because it's not just the final that we love, it's actually all the build up to that. So you've got, you know, all the heats, if you will, the semi-finals and stuff like that. And of course, as a born and bred Scouser, my money, and I'm putting everything behind Liverpool to get it. I think it would be phenomenal to have it there. You know, just the Beatles alone, it being one of the most, it's the music capital of the world, Liverpool, essentially. So in my opinion, it makes perfect sense to put it there. And as well as our massive arena, we've obviously got Anfield Stadium, which I think would just be iconic. If you can imagine Eurovision, the final, taking place in Anfield, I just think you can't really get much better than that. But each of the cities have had to go through a kind of rigorous process to get to where they are now. We've had other cities drop out along the way. Cardiff bowed out. They said, no, it's not for us. We can't make it work. And the cities that it's been narrowed down to have had to prove that they have, you know, an international airport, they have the facilities, not only just to host the arena show, but also, you know, the infrastructure there in terms of the hotels to accommodate people and travel infrastructure as well. So, you know, the 7 we've got, I think it'd be amazing at any, but Liverpool is what I'm hoping for.
You're allowed to be partisan on this channel, Ellie, that's all right. I must therefore launch a defence for Manchester, my hometown. We've got the best music heritage. I mean, look, Stone Roses, Happy Mondays, all that lot, the dance music scene. I know, I can see you shaking your head going, I'm not entirely convinced about that. And
No,
also, of course...
Do you know what? I actually agree. Manchester is epic for music. And even now, a lot of people do think about the heritage, but as with Liverpool, you know, really thriving music scene now in its element. And also, you know, there are festivals that happen there regularly, as there are in Liverpool. So I think either would be great. We've got, you know, the infrastructure in both as well. I will say, however, though, Janice Long, first female presenter on BBC Radio 1, was a Scouser as well. So we'll just get another music tick in there, you know?
You're definitely, and of course, we've just had amazing Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. They would be bang up to host another big international event, wouldn't they? Ellie, we must say goodbye, unfortunately. Ellie Phillips there. No doubt you will come back and let us know when we find out which British city will be hosting Eurovision at 2023. I asked you for your emails. You have not disappointed. Kathy has said we're talking about the water shortages, the drought, and the water companies we're just feeling let down by them, aren't we? Kathy has said, actually, what we need are water companies to do what we pay them to do. Provide water. Sometimes you can just kind of boil down, can't you, the essence of a story into something very simplistic. Richard said, alternatively, of course, the water companies could instead make a start on repairing all the leaks in their pipes that they ignore year after year. No doubt to next week's thunderstorms will be the wrong type of rain to fill reservoirs. So you've been great. Thank you. I've had a lovely week. I'm very much ready for my weekend. I hope you are too. I will be back next week, but Alex will be back on Monday hosting We Need to Talk About. Coming up next is The Briefing with Diana Davidson. First, though, time for the weather. Have a lovely weekend.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Hot and sunny once again for the vast majority, with 35 Celsius possible in places today and tomorrow. A couple of exceptions, it will stay much cooler for the far north of Scotland with cloud, some outbreaks of rain here, although not a great deal, and some mistiness around North Sea, northeastern coasts, so eastern Scotland and northeast England will see some mist and low cloud, not everywhere, but certainly a signal for some of that to linger around these coasts, keeping things much cooler here as well. But elsewhere it's sunny and it is very hot. Temperatures widely reaching 30 to 33 Celsius, and in the south 34 or 35 Celsius are possible. The hot spot, I think, somewhere around the Midlands into the West Country and London. Into the evening, and there will be some outbreaks of rain close to the Northern Isles as well as the Outer Hebrides, but this will generally be light and patchy, and around these North Sea coasts once again, mist, low cloud, fog creeps in, but elsewhere clear spell.